Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll just give it 1 minute and then we'll kick off. Okay, good morning. Thank you all very much for joining us today. My name's Eleanor Thompson. I'm part of the GSA's Executive Council. So this webinar is part of the Global Sourcing Association's SourcingTech series. We cover a different topic each month with different speakers, so please do look out for those. Today's is on virtual reality, and we have three fantastic speakers with us today who I will introduce to you now before I hand over to them. So we have Neil Fox. Neil is a CTO and transformation lead at Hexaware with over 35 years experience in tech, 20 of those on product development leadership and 15 on transformational consulting. He's provided various levels of global processes and technology optimization for several leading consulting companies. Really, really great to have you here today, Neil. Thank you so much for joining us. So we have James. James is a VP of EMEA at Infinite Lambda and CEO of One Shot Immersive. One Shot Immersive is a social venture that aims to use virtual reality to empower people to save lives in the world's most dangerous environments. They've teamed up with David Knott Foundation to create and deliver a beta product to Yemen in January 2020 in order to train healthcare personnel to deal with mass casualties. Then next we have Laura Harvey. She's a head of property desk claims for Davies Group UK. Her property desk team manages 100,000 property insurance claims per year and holds customer service and technical expertise at the heart of everything they do. Virtual reality training was a product identified and developed by Laura through the Davies Innovation Lab in 2018, and it has since gone on to be used extensively across the claims team, as well as insurer and MGA clients. We're really excited to have you all and our speakers with us today. If you do have any questions, please pop them in the chat box and I will go through them at the end for the Q&A. So over to you, Neil.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm going to just take a few minutes and do a bit of an introduction to virtual reality to give us all a sense of context here, context being super important, right? I don't have any slides to share, so this is just going to be a verbal discussion about the VR environment that we're in today and what the future might look like for us. Today, the VR market in general was valued at about $17 billion in 2020, but they're expecting an incredible growth rate of 48%, reaching $185 billion in just the next 5 years, $185 billion market. The uses of VR are as wide almost as reality itself. Today, obviously, entertainment being the big one. If you've had exposure to VR at all, maybe you've played a game called Beat Saber, in which objects come at you and you're holding virtual lightsabers and there's music playing. You've got to hit these objects. It gives you a bit of a workout, and both mentally and physically. And if you haven't tried it, I suggest that you do. But beyond entertainment, of course, education, which we'll talk about a little bit. Training, of course, medicine, which James will talk to us about quite a bit. Architecture, real estate, sales, manufacturing, design, the list goes on and on in terms of the uses of virtual reality. For me, the biggest surprise in my experience with virtual reality has really been social. I did not expect to create connections with people the way that I have been able to in VR. I tend to be a VR poker player and see people in VR poker tables regularly and have developed, kind of relationships with them, which is really interesting. And the same is true for other VR endeavors that I spend time with. I also spend a weekly meeting with a colleague. We were first meeting in Zoom, my colleague happens to be in the UK, I'm in the US. And we've been meeting weekly. I told him about virtual reality and he bought a headset. And then from then on for the past 3 months, every week, we meet in virtual reality using an app called Spatial. Spatial is one of those applications that allows you to join a virtual environment both from VR, but also from your phone and from the web. They've got a web interface that allows you to get in there and move around. And these kinds of apps allow you to bring in lots of mixed media. So PowerPoint presentations and images and video and sounds, podcasts, whatever you like. And my friend Barry and I have walked museums together in virtual reality. We've sat around a campfire and had a talk. We've sat around boardrooms and presentations with whiteboards. And what's interesting about a lot of these environments is that they don't just mirror reality like you would in a boardroom, but you're able to manifest all sorts of virtual objects in these environments, right? We can pick a whiteboard out of the air. We can pick a web page out of the air. We can pick up, planning boards and, Scrum-based planning activities and backlogs and things like that. It becomes, magical in a very real sense. But in my view, we're at the very kind of nascent area of virtual reality. The Oculus Quest 2, which was launched last year, has sold about 6 million units. I view as the iPod 1 or 2. It's the first device that untethers you from your computer in a real way, leaving Google Cardboard aside, but it gives you a real virtual reality experience without being tethered to a computer. And this is just the beginning. Apple has planned a number of VR releases. Supposedly, the rumors have it they've got teams of a couple hundred people working on VR programs. They've certainly made dozens of acquisitions of VR companies, both hardware and software, and have filed a lot of patents. There's certainly a technological race to develop the iPad of VR, and that is going on between Google, Apple, and Facebook, and a couple of other companies. Also, when we think about VR and the experience that you have there and kind of the social connection I was mentioning earlier, there are haptic feedback devices available today. You can buy VR vests and gloves and all sorts of devices that give you real world experience in a virtual reality environment. I've seen VR gloves that have servos attached to each of your fingers, and that when you pick up a virtual object, it feels like a real object, right? It gives you the same resistance that you would see. And so the implications for training people, especially in a post-COVID world, are pretty vast and pretty exciting. If you didn't realize it, you probably have augmented reality already in your pocket. We talked about virtual reality, and that's the focus certainly, but augmented reality, which I think the other speakers will talk about as well, is where you're overlaying computer information and graphics on top of the real world environment that you're in. If you have a modern smartphone, you might try Googling some animals like an octopus or a tiger or a badger, and you have the opportunity to view that object, that animal in 3D, but also a button to say, show in my environment. And when you do that, you can walk down the street with a Bengal tiger by your side today with a device that's in your pocket. Google also has a feature called Live View. If you're walking using Google Maps, there's an option to turn on Live View that will give you directions and landmarks augmented on top of the streets that you're looking at and the buildings that you're looking at. So these types of features and capabilities are evolving rapidly. At the same time, there's complexity still in this technology. It's very demanding from both a developer standpoint, a hardware standpoint, and software. At Hexaware, the company I work at, where we provide services to major brands and companies around the world, we have developed a sales tool for Ricoh copiers. So industrial copiers, commercial copiers are very large machines. You can't really take them to somebody to show them. It's not practical for them to go to an area to see them often. So we have developed a virtual reality version of a Ricoh copier, set of them, that somebody can put on glasses and interact with this copying machine to see the features and how easy it is to use and to maintain, etc. But we want to use virtual reality also for meetings such as this one. It would be great to have a customer meeting in virtual reality, but the complexity of the software and the hardware have made it impractical so far to do so. I expect in the next couple of years that will change, and we'll all be spending more time in virtual reality, with some of us spending more time in VR than we do in actual reality, or at least as much time. So we expect this market to mature quickly from here on, but we'll see. I know that we've all been somewhat disappointed by technical promises in the past, but I'm optimistic on this one. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to our next speaker, James, who will talk to us about virtual reality in medicine. James?
Thanks, Neil. I'll just share my screen. Good. Hello, everyone. I hope you can hear me and see the slides. If Abby, you could let me know if you can't, perhaps. So my name is James. I'm CEO and founder of One Shot Immersive. We've got a very, very clear mission at One Shot, which is virtual reality that empowers people to save lives. Now, it is a company, but it's a social venture. I'm currently unsure as to what structure I put it into to make sure it achieves this very clear mission. We've got an amazing team of people, all voluntary advisors to me, from emergency consultants in the US and the UK, diplomats, tech gurus, anaesthetists, legal advisors, business advisors, film directors, product advisors. All really filling the gaps of my huge lack of knowledge. And listening to Neil, I'm not a VR expert. I'm someone that identified a problem when I was a military doctor and an aid doctor. So my background is in conflict and disaster. It's where my passion lies. But I can really see, and what I get really excited about is looking for technology that can solve these real world problems. And what's so great listening to Neil is that as these advances happen and these technologies land in your pocket, then for me, it's about saying, well, if this is now off the shelf technology, what does that mean for the most challenging parts of the world and the problems that we want to solve as a society? Where I see VR lending itself is for the difficult, the expensive, and the unethical. And what I mean by that is this really draws into focus what happens in a war zone or a catastrophe or a disaster, where there are so many factors at play, and you need to train people to be prepared for these almost unimaginable scenarios. And as Neil was alluding to, in virtual reality, you can create more than reality. So you can really introduce a huge amount of stimuli that are going to enable someone to desensitize themselves. So in the top is a chemical attack in Syria. At the bottom is a terrorist attack in London. I'm not going to play the videos today. Firstly, you didn't have any warning that these videos would be here. They're not particularly pleasant to see, but if you do want to kind of more of a visual experience, please do get in touch with me after this talk. So with that in mind, I teamed up with David Knott, who's a very well-known war surgeon. He goes around the world, both operating in the world's most dangerous places, but also teaching in the world's most dangerous places. So when I showed him the London Underground scenario in the bottom left here, he immediately said, "Can you come to Syria with me? And can we go and test this?" I didn't have much of a choice. I think about 10 days later, here I am in Syria with David, showing these virtual reality prototypes that we'd built to Syrian healthcare workers involved in the conflict there. And we came back sort of completely and utterly animated about how VR, such a, as Neil said, a nascent technology, something that's felt so fresh and so part of the kind of 1% of the world, that actually we thought, actually we can use this. And so we went straight to the world's worst humanitarian crisis, which is Yemen. And we decided we needed to build a scenario that was going to help train people to force multiply. And what I mean by that is, in the UK, there are 345 surgeons for every 1 million people. In Yemen, there are 4. Which means that if you go to hospital in Yemen with a traumatic injury, a life-threatening injury, you will likely die because there won't be anyone there. And so the system collapses extremely quickly in a place like Yemen. And so how do you get people around you in your healthcare department trained up to try and spread the load so that it's not all sitting on the shoulders of the nurses and the doctors, especially if you don't have enough of them? And one of the ways you can force multiply in a mass casualty, so when there are many patients, is by training people around you, and they don't have to be medically qualified. So how do we teach them a system in amongst chaos to decide who lives, and in some cases who dies, and actually making those very definite decisions? And normally you categorize them into 4 different categories in a situation like this. And so a mass casualty is defined as an event where the number and severity of the casualties overwhelms the available resources. So in simple terms, that could just be me on my own facing 3 casualties that I can't deal with all of them. Obviously, in a war zone, it's usually more. It's usually hundreds of people, 1 hospital that is immediately overwhelmed. And so how do you create some kind of order to that chaos? You triage and you rank everyone in order of priority. You're trying to do the most for the most. So it's a utilitarian approach and trying to save the most lives rather than spending all of your time on one particularly severely injured patient. So this seemed like us a very difficult, a very expensive, and an ethically challenging scenario to create. So we went ahead and created it. I spoke to David Knott and his colleagues for hours. I looked through footage and videos, really trying to get a grasp of the reality, and we built a scenario based on real patients, on real stories from Syria, from Yemen, from multiple war zones that David had been. And so we created an experience which was much like this one you're about to see. This is in the Gaza Strip. This is a mass casualty triage officer. The chap wearing a white coat is the triage officer. This is a fantastic triage, and it's very ordered. So what he's doing, in fact, I won't play that because I said I wouldn't, because it's got some gory photos, gory pictures. But essentially, he is in charge of deciding, as the patient comes through the door, which one is going to be treated now and which one is going to have to wait. And so in the VR experience that we created, the user has this exact scenario. They've got patient arriving after patient arriving, and they have to rank them, and that's using gaze control. So they use gaze control to select which category each patient falls into. And so we filmed it in 360, but we then gamified that in Unity, which is a VR engine. And so we were able to superimpose choices and interactivity into that, but also vital signs telling the user the heart rate, the blood pressure, and any key information that might make a difference to the decision they make on treatment. And then this was very much the kind of scene that you'd face, and this is when the user's in. This is just a still taken from that experience. In fact, the patient here is a former military colleague of mine who did actually lose a limb in Afghanistan, and so he volunteered to be an actor in this case. So this was the making of it, and then this is a picture, probably one of my favorite pictures that I've ever seen, which is actually Yemeni healthcare workers using our experience to train themselves for a mass casualty. And hopefully the so what is, I see this as has huge potential, not just for mass casualties, for multiple choices and medical scenarios you face in conflict and disaster zones. So my aim is to make VR and maybe eventually augmented reality the mainstream of conflict and disaster training. So that's me, and I'm going to hand over to Laura. So I'll just stop presenting. Laura, can you hear me?
Thanks very much, James. That was fantastic. So my name is Laura Harvey, and much like James, I'm not a tech creator of virtual reality. I'm very much an ambassador and user of the technology in my space. So Davies Virtual Reality, which is the business that I am involved in, was a process which was born out of our internal innovation lab. So it was developed by myself in 2018, and the idea itself was born out of seeking a more engaging way of delivering training to our workforce. And our workforce handle household insurance claims on behalf of numerous insurers and MGAs in the insurance market in the UK. I wanted to set up a programme which combines the excellent technical ability of our handlers, but providing it in a little bit more of an exciting way. And using an innovative approach to kind of draw out some of the more tedious or less exciting subject matters that fall into the insurance world. I wanted to provide an engaging platform that would both encourage personal development, but also boost the engagement around training. I'm well aware that insurance has not always been thought of as the most exciting or the most innovative place for technology development. I'm really lucky to work for a business, Davies, who are actively trying to book that trend and have significant investment in technology-led solutions for our clients. At the time of the Innovation Lab and Davies Virtual Reality being introduced, we hadn't expanded that technology process into our training. And so the key here for me was to get a method of training which engaged our staff on topics that they couldn't otherwise visualise. We've got a very diverse employment group. Many of our staff members, and certainly many of us, have been lucky enough not to experience some of the issues that our policyholders are calling us for. So lucky enough never to have dealt with a flood in our home or a fire in our home. Yet we ask our handlers on a daily basis to deal with these situations as a first port of call. And then we ask them to be empathetic, but also proactively handle the situations. And that can be a really difficult balance, especially someone that's been doing claims for a certain amount of time. You can almost become hardened to the fact that another escape of water has occurred or something has happened because you focused on the process. And we wanted to take that process focus away and make sure that we were also covering off the empathy and remembering the policyholder who's at the end of these issues. So with the very first response when somebody calls us when an issue has happened, so making that process as pain-free as possible is absolutely top of our list. And what the VR modules allowed me to do with the claims team is to immerse the handlers in a visual representation of damage when the worst happens. And it means that we can equip our handlers better to deal with those policyholders and support their needs at any given time. So when we started building the virtual reality platform, we looked at where our core value needed to come from that. And we initially focused on escape of water claims. So escape of water is the most commonly claimed for peril on a household insurance policy. We had some excellent previous training. We've got a fantastic set of trainers, but they were PowerPoint presentations, they were photographs, they were videos at best. And we wanted to take that expertise and that wealth of experience and take that to the next level. And what we really wanted to do was instill a practical support while demonstrating and conveying some of the panic, the stress, and the empathy that we need to give at that moment. Because we needed them to understand the immediate impact of a flood when one of our policyholders has that. And virtual reality ticked all the boxes for me in that respect. It was an innovative training platform, provided an engaging and unique way of training our staff. So the escape of water module, which has been live now since 2018, is the core of our virtual reality training proposition. And essentially, we have our handlers in a position where they are coming home from holiday and they open that virtual front door to find that their house has been destroyed by a flood while they've been away. They need to do lots of practical things. So where is the stopcock? Where is my insurance documents? And they need to do all of this whilst kind of dealing with the chaos that's going on in the background. So tired kids off a plane, just want to go home, they're scared. So you've got the children in the background, you know, verbalizing their fear. And I have to add, they have to do all this in the dark, because the very first action of the virtual reality training is they go to switch a light switch on and the electrics blow. So that's quite an amusing way of watching our guys kind of get introduced into virtual reality, because you do ultimately get that kind of shock factor. But it's a very real shock factor that happens on a very regular basis for any significant escape of water claim. So we've got the kids in the background making noise. We also have a heartbeat feature in it, where the handlers can feel their own heartbeat, which is aligned to the evidence of damage that's being presented to them. And that's that panic piece coming in. That's that overriding panic feeling that comes into one of these situations, taken away some of the rational thoughts and actually looking at your home, which is a very, very personal thing to people, and watching the level of destruction that's happened whilst you've been on your holiday or your vacation. And we added some really realistic and some real kind of relatable issues into this as well. So the lights have popped, you're in the dark, you're looking around your home that's been destroyed. So ultimately now you would reach to your phone and use your torch, and there's a virtual phone within the headset which they switch on. They're using the torch to navigate around their home. But, you know, as all of us will be able to relate to, your battery's dying because you've been on a long plane journey, you've come back from a holiday. And that, again, is all adding to the real life scenarios that our handlers find, that our policy holders find themselves in when they come home to this situation. The sessions are run in a classroom environment, typically pre-COVID. So we would have a whole room set up with the headsets and the headphones, really immersing our guys into this training, supported by one of our technical trainers. COVID has forced us to look at alternatives, but I think that's only a real positive for us. The agile approach and the portable devices that we use mean that we have been able to continue on with training during the COVID period by sending out these headsets to our staff members in their homes and those that are working remotely from other offices. So we have been keeping up and trying to be as agile as possible using this technology, and that's something that would have been really difficult to do without the current situation we've got with the virtual reality headsets. So that's been actually a really nice addition to our modules on the training front. And it's completely changed how we upskill and train our staff. Post-COVID, 100% of our current workforce in the property claims division had been through this training, and all of our new starters have this as part of their induction to the business. And we've seen a real increase in the measurable outcomes from this. So it was really important for me when we were looking at introducing training in this way that there was a real key measurable output from it. I needed to be able to demonstrate that this was the future of training for our business. I was really pleased to see that our post-training knowledge retention testing showed an average of 35% increase on knowledge retention, and also that our test scores directly post-training were 29% higher than in comparison to the previous PowerPoint-led process. And that was amazing. That's a fantastic result, and that is what we're all looking for. We're looking to give our staff the confidence, the long-term confidence of how to deal with these claims. But the staff engagement piece is the thing that really tipped me over the edge. The amount of people reaching out to me once these sessions started, wanting more and more and wanting to do training was just phenomenal. And the buzz that created inside the office with everyone from all levels of the business was really, really exciting. We've been able to utilize virtual reality training across not only our current workforce, but we do a lot of school mentoring with local schools and colleges. And this has been an amazing tool to take out to some of those areas with graduates and with school leavers, because it really does make them come to life the job that we're going to be asking them to do, or the career that they might want to go into in the future. So for us, this isn't just about training our current workforce. This is about engaging with our future workforce and getting them engaged in insurance and what that might bring for their future career ambitions. So we've used it across the business, and we've sent headsets to our colleagues in the US and to other areas of the world as well. So it's a really agile program, which is really important for us. Not only have we used it in the escape of water, the technical training modules, but we've also been able to use it as a tool for personal development, and even more so in the last year as a mental health and a wellbeing tool for some of our staff members. So we've got a number of platforms available on the technology, which is meditation, stress management, just supporting people in any way that we can with the technology through what has been a really tough year for many people. One of the other favourites, which is quite a brutal module of training, is our personal development public speaking module. And this was utilised across all of our business development staff and anybody that would be coming out and doing a public speaking piece of work. And this allows you to upload your presentation or upload your words into the headset and for you to practice in front of a virtual audience. This one can get a bit tricky because if you're not engaging enough, your tone isn't correct or your speed isn't correct, then you can turn your virtual audience off and they will get their mobile phones out or they will start talking over you, at which point, you have to skill and train to get your audience back on side and listening to what you're doing. That one's got a great measurable outcome that can track your eye contact. It can track how long you were looking at the audience versus how long you were looking at your script. It will track your tone, your tonality, your speed of speech. And that's been a really fantastic one for training our business development staff, and something that we just never really had the ability to support in the way that we're doing now. We believe at the moment, and we do believe previously, that we're the only insurance claims provider who is doing virtual reality within the technical training space. And not only that, we've gone out and commissioned our own. So there was loads of brilliant virtual realities off the shelf, and we use a lot of that in our program as well. But in relation to our escape of water and our technical training, we've completely built our own module using a third-party supplier. And that's just been amazing to be able to speak to our clients and our staff about that. This is a uniquely available proposition within group. I don't think we've seen the end of virtual reality in terms of what it can be done for. And absolutely, Neil mentioned earlier, I think the sky is the limit when it comes to virtual reality. I really can't wait to see what else we can get doing with this platform. I think it's only going to grow and expand as we proceed through the coming years. But yeah, definitely want to continue using it in our space. And I think we'll see more and more of this as we progress. And I'm going to pass over to Eleanor now. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. So 3 really interesting talks. If you could all put your questions in the chat, I will ask them for you. But while we're waiting for those, I do have a couple of questions myself. So Neil, you have introduced me to a whole world of VR products that I did not know existed. So my personal assumption has always been that VR is pretty expensive and it's one of those premium products that isn't necessarily accessible to everyone. So really a 2-part question. Is that the case today? Is my assumption correct? And if so, is this something that you think will inevitably get cheaper and become a part of everyday equipment in the same way that our laptops and our headphones are?
Yeah, no, you'd be surprised to know that the Oculus Quest 2, which is a device I mentioned earlier that I've been turning people onto, is just 300 pounds. It's actually very inexpensive as far as a piece of tech kit goes, right? Less expensive than your phone or a gaming console or a laptop. So it really does hit the mainstream, and that's why it's been so popular. It provides an incredibly immersive experience. Anybody that's put on a VR headset, and James and Laura can all attest to this as well, are shocked by the amount of immersive quality you get, even from a fairly inexpensive piece of kit like that. You see videos on YouTube of people playing a VR game and then falling because they're trying to climb a virtual mountain and slip and they physically fall down. It is that immersive, and the prices are only going to drop, and the technology is going to get increasingly better as time goes on.
Amazing. That's really good to know. Thank you very much. James, I'm going to come to you. So really interesting piece. I've heard you talk about one shot a few times now, and every time I'm just blown away that the impact that this could have. So you mentioned that this that you saw this being used not just in mass casualty, but in other areas of conflict and disaster. Are you able to expand on that at all? Give us more detail of what you think might come next.
Yeah, I must just apologise for my current reality, which is 3 children all screaming at the same time. So, so apologies for that. In terms of conflict and disaster, I think what I've seen is, whilst I'm biased towards the medicine, a lot of the world that you're in, whether you're a journalist in that world, whether you're a local civilian, whether you're a medic, actually it's about atmospherics and about situational awareness. So where I think actually virtual reality really lends itself to is situational awareness. Actually, what happened in the build-up to an event that then results in some injured people that perhaps we might have known. So when I was in the movie, they talked about atmospherics, and so dogs barking and children disappearing from the streets suddenly might give you the sense that something is about to happen. So and that in a marketplace in a country that maybe you're unfamiliar with, you're a new journalist or whoever you are there in that place, what has changed that feels different? And so that is one example of situational awareness that it's very hard to train for. But in a virtual world, you can put things into it that start like as I said, like a dog barking or the noise of children playing disappearing. So it's kind of fascinating, and actually it's cross-sectoral. I've just focused on the medical bit, but we've been asked a lot about situational awareness training.
Amazing. Thank you so much. That's really interesting. I hadn't even thought about the noises that might occur before something is actually going to happen. Laura, I think what you're doing is amazing. It's a really innovative way to use virtual reality in the workplace. It's obviously had fantastic results, but how did you make the initial case for this internally? What did that process look like? And do you have any advice for anyone wanting to position this in their company?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So Davies Group run an internal innovation lab. So we've got a big workforce, an international workforce, where we are asked every year, invited to put forward ideas to make our business better. And the virtual reality program was born through that. For me, I wanted virtuality to be seen as a measurable tool and not just a whim. You know, at the time, there wasn't really much of that going on in our industry. Even speaking to clients at that time, it was seen as a bit of a bit of a nice to have rather than actually having any practicalities or any outcomes of it. So for me, there was a clear focus internally that I needed to make this exciting. I needed to make it innovative, but I also needed to have a really clear view of what I wanted or expected the outcomes to be from it. So for me, it was all about, this is exciting, this is what we're going to do, but actually this is what we're going to get, and the benefits of it were not really thought about by some of the people that we were speaking to, especially, very traditional market. Going out and suggesting we're going to now train our staff through virtual reality was, quite a few sharp intakes of breath going on, where people are going, oh, that sounds very whimsical, that sounds very fun, but actually, what can you evidence out the back of it? So for me, that process allowed me to actually collate a lot of information from across the world about its use cases, but also include within my modules exactly what the outcomes and what evidence I was going to be getting out of it. And for me, that's been the key to getting future investment and to keep it going throughout the business, is just being able to evidence those measurables.
Absolutely. And a question from the audience: was it expensive to develop?
I guess it depends on what you're already spending on training and what you're already doing in that space. So for us, it wasn't a cheap piece. We chose to bespoke and create our very own module, and we spoke to a lot of people in the market, a lot of suppliers in the market who were able to give us different solutions. Some people could give us an off-the-shelf solution, which there were some absolutely amazing off-the-shelf solutions ready to go. And that was a more inexpensive way of bringing this quickly to market. We chose to do a bespoke module, which meant creating a Davies house. The positive thing for me in the way that we chose to do it was that we built a whole house and we chose to do escape of water. But because the environment was built as a standalone environment, I can then go and do what I want to that house now. So initial development up front for the house build was around the £60,000-70,000 mark. But actually, if I now want to go back and burn that house down, or I want to go and create some other disaster within that property, the onward work is much cheaper because of the way that we chose to develop it.
Amazing, really interesting. Thank you very much. One other question from the audience is, has anyone used VR in procurement, and how?
So I can speak to that. We're involved in a lot of procurement activities on the supplier side, right? So we provide IT services in my company and talk to a lot of vendor management personnel, supplier procurement folks, and we have talked about sending VR headsets to the various stakeholders in our prospects environment. We have not done that yet. We're looking for the right opportunity. We believe we're in the final stages of a pretty large opportunity with a global manufacturing client, and we are planning to send them headsets, just a small number. The thing that's kept us from doing this in any kind of scale is the more people you have, the more complicated it becomes, right? The more support it demands. And so we want to make sure that it's a very positive experience for everyone, which means that it has to be intuitive. You have to have kind of one-on-one care to set up the headset and to maybe create an account in many cases, and then to launch the software and make sure you're joining the right room, and all of those things that are not easy for people who are not technologists, right? Which you expect people just generally not to be. At the same time, we have created this really interesting customer visitor center in virtual reality, where it's a tour of our campus. You can walk around and see, the environment that you'll be operating in, meet some of the people virtually that you'll be working with. So there's huge upside potential, but we want to make sure that it's a positive experience.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. Neil, James, Laura, do you have any questions for your fellow speakers on this product or anything that they've been through?
Yeah, I can. I think it's probably to both of you, but perhaps Neil as well. With the sort of on the procurement side, one of the challenges we've got at One Shot as a sort of social venture is funding the development of this platform. And one of the proposals that we put forward as a way of doing it was actually to introduce products into these scenarios so that people also get to practice with medical devices, medical products, a particular type of tourniquet or a particular type of chest seal or whatever it might be. And then we're endorsing products, which has got good things and bad things about it, but we're endorsing products that perhaps we think are good and that meet the mark in the environments within which we're working. I just wonder how much VR marketing is taking place at the moment, product placement, you place an Omega watch on someone's wrist and it's this kind of thing. But for me, that seemed like a potentially a good way to fund the development of these scenarios.
James, it's a fantastic question, and one, as you point out, is not a simple one, right? It may appear simple, but it's not. I understand I was reading an article about Facebook and advertising in virtual reality. Many vendors have intentionally halted any activity to do that because they are concerned about the reaction from people when it comes to being marketed to in such a constrained environment, in such a captive environment. James, I agree with your supposition that it's good for funding. Funding, I'm sure, in your model is a challenge, and getting people to fund it is a good option to think about when it comes to applying a particular device. I'm not sure how to get around that. Maybe that's something you and I can talk about offline. But it is a situation which is both obviously very positive in terms of raising funds, but also very challenging in terms of people feeling like they're being marketed to. I suppose that if you do it subtly, it might work out, might strike that balance.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, no, I'd like to talk about that further.
Yeah, I would too.
Great.
Brilliant. Does anyone else have any final questions before we finish up?
So James, you'd mentioned, I think you'd mentioned the Unity engine. Is that right? Is that the environment that you're using to create these simulations?
Yes.
Yeah. So for those of you on the phone that aren't aware, Unity is perhaps the most popular development tool set for 3D. It's an open source product, so you can download it for free, something that I've done and started playing around with a bit. So if you were interested in kind of dipping your toe in the water to both experience virtual reality and even maybe dabble with creation of it, if you want to turn your IT department on or your 17-year-old kid, pick up an Oculus 2 headset for 300 quid and download the Unity engine to a decent PC, and you can play around with it. It's quite neat, and there's so much available, as Laura said, kind of off the shelf. There's a lot of trials that you can take, a lot of tools you can dabble with. For a very small investment, you can really start getting into this environment and this this virtual reality space and see what it's like. I highly recommend it.
Yeah, and actually, just to add to that, because it's a gamer's world, if you like, VR. What I've found is when you ask a gamer, hey, could you help me with this project? It's a game, but it's a real game. They're thrilled to be involved, and actually, it actually has perhaps a meaning that they perhaps hadn't anticipated when they went into game development. So we had one chap who just finished his gaming degree at Glasgow, and came and helped us on the project. And so I think there's definitely a nice mix there between the gaming industry and the real world that Laura and Neil are involved with as well.
I think you're right, James. One of the things we did when we were looking at setting this up was actually speak to our local universities. So we have connections with our local universities around geography and law, but we never really tapped into or had the need to tap into the gamification, or that they recently that year had launched a virtual reality degree at the local university. So it was really useful to actually open up our industry to a completely different set of people who are now really excited about how can I make that work for you. And one of the challenges we put to them and worked with them was for them to do that as part of their degree. So it's been an amazing opportunity to have other people involved in something that we probably wouldn't have had them exposed to previously.
Totally.
Very interesting. I can't believe all of these products that I didn't know existed to do with virtual reality, and all of these ways that you're all using them is just so fantastic. So thank you all so much for your time today. Thank you to all of our attendees and all of our speakers. If you do want to speak to anyone directly, I'm sure they're very happy for you to reach out to them directly on LinkedIn if you want to discuss any of the topics further. Look out for the next SourcingTech webinar that we have with the GSA, and if you need anything from any of us, this will be on our website too. Oh, we have one more question quickly. We have a 2-minute delay with LinkedIn, so this one's just come in last minute. So universities around the planet would love to get involved with James's work. I know that managing products with transitory students might be a challenge, but I suspect the queue to help would be quite large. So not a question, but a comment. James, do you have anything to add on that?
John, please help. that would be great. I'd love to talk more. So yeah.
Amazing. Well, thank you all so much. And I look forward to seeing you again soon.
Thanks, Eleanor, Neil, Laura.
Thanks very much, everyone.
Take care.
Wonderful experience. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.